I want to talk about one of the indicators, number 2. What I will say, we could have done from the secretariat the same analysis for all 10 indicators. So this analysis and reflection is available for all 10 indicators. So we look at teachers and trainers. You know that. That is what the EQAVET reference framework actually says. It doesn't say a great deal, and because it is very high level, the members of the EQAVET network wanted to understand better what these things mean. So a lot of work has taken place on understanding the indicator number 2 in terms of teachers and trainers. So what I will do, I will talk about 2 things. I will talk firstly about what the indicator means to the members of EQAVET, that is explaining their current thinking on this indicator. And then secondly, I will explain what the monitoring information tells us about whether this indicator is being used by member states. But firstly, I will try to explain what the member states think this indicator means. So, just for information, we have on the, just check, yes, on the left-hand side, and the section of our website which explains the latest thinking on indicator number 2, and there's lots of information and case studies there. On the right is what the network calls a policy brief. This is a very short document, and you have a copy in your files. It's a very short document which has been written following a peer learning activity. And in the EQAVET model, a peer learning activity brings together 15 countries to discuss common understanding of a particular issue. So the policy brief is what the network concluded following a peer learning activity. So let me try to explain latest thinking. I won't read all these. I will highlight the most important statements about the indicator. Okay, the first one is the first line. This is really important. The indicator is seen as a proxy measure, not the real measure, an approximate measure of the quality of teaching. That's how the member states see it. So if you do well on indicator 2, they assume you do well on the quality of teaching. Bit dodgy, but that's the assumption. The member states confirmed the second point. Now this is quite interesting because in some countries this is very important, but across the network there was agreement that the teaching quality is the most important thing in determining outcomes. Of all the things that could be determine the quality of outcome, the network thinks it's the quality of teaching. I will now point to number 4, and this is actually a bit of a problem for the network members, because the indicator is a measure of the input into teaching, and it's a measure of process. So it's about the money that is invested. It's about the CPD. it is not a measure of output. And member states want to be quite clear that they are measuring inputs and process, not outputs. Okay, so there's some quite clear statements about indicator 2. So quality matters. It's not the best measure, but it is telling us something. So we then looked, the members have looked at what data is actually being collected on indicator 2 right across the member states. And depending on your system, you will look at that data and say, oh, that's easy, we've got that data. Or you look at that data and you say, no chance, we have no idea about some of this data. But this is what member states are looking at. The number of people in training programs. Importantly, in some countries, that's non-formal learning as well as formal courses. So lots of information there. The detail doesn't matter. What matters is different member states are doing very different things in terms of the collection of data. But that data that I've shown there is very much linked to what the indicators actually say. Okay? And some systems have all that data, every single bit of it, and they've had it for years. And other member states have some of that data only. But that's the typical sort of data that's being collected. Now, the other thing the member states have talked about is how do they actually use indicator 2? It's great having data, but actually having data is only the first step. You have to use the data and you have to do something with it. So the data is being used essentially to look at the effectiveness of teaching, and secondly, it is being used to look at the impact of the teachers on the achievement of students. So whatever data you've got, having the data is no use unless you use it. So the member states have been looking at how do we use the data, and they say two things basically. We want data that tells us whether the teachers are effective and whether the students learn. And if the data does not show that, it's no use. Okay? So this is quite hard-edged. This is quite strict in many ways because you have data for a purpose. And so the member states are talking about teacher effectiveness and student outcomes as the reasons for having this sort of data. Okay. Having said that, under the EQAVET reference framework, we know that it is a toolbox, and you select the indicators that work for you. If the indicators are not useful, then you don't use them. So in the monitoring, we ask the member states, who uses indicator number 2? That slide is for initial vet. I think perhaps it's just worth noticing that in this column is, I'm going to find the countries, Estonia, Lithuania, who say they do not use this indicator, and we've got Denmark, Estonia, and Lithuania who don't use the second part of the indicator. So there are countries who are choosing not to use the indicator because it doesn't work for them, And as always with our monitoring, there are some countries who choose not to reply to who do not reply to the question. So we do not know what these countries are doing. But you have a realization there that 63% of member states are always using indicator 2A and 50% are using indicator 2B. So we have a sense of whether this is an important indicator for member states or not. We do the same thing for the indicator for continuing VET. I think perhaps what's most noticeable, if you go to the not used column for continuing VET, we'll name the countries. So it's France, Hungary, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Austria and Romania. They don't use this indicator for continuing VET. And again, the principle is important. It's about using the indicators that are important for you, not using them automatically. And then I go finally to my last two slides to make comparisons. Now, I hope this works. The colour might be quite difficult, but to show the comparison of indicator number 2 down here, these two, it's sometimes useful to look at these two indicators compared to all the other indicators. And what you see for initial VET is some of the indicators are very important. And I refer to our discussion yesterday from Turkey about indicator 9 and 10, and you can see how popular indicator 9 and 10 are for member states in relation to initial VET, because that's how, so you can see we've got down here 19% of member states who always use indicator 9B. I guess it's not that important for member states as an indicator when you compare to these indicators at 82 and 84%. So you get a sense of which indicators are most important for member states. And finally, the survey from the secretariat looked at the same thing for continuing VET to identify the most, well, I was going to say, I thought, there it is. Okay, we have got it. Sorry, clicking the right button. And we did the same analysis for all the indicators for continuing VET. And again, what you notice is most of these numbers that are always used are much lower. And again, we go to 9 and 10 as examples, and you can see that 9B and 10B are not very popular for member states. So that is a quick summary of the indicator number 2. And I conclude by just commenting that what you've got in the EQAVET Secretariat's work is, for every indicator, an analysis of what the member states think, lots of case studies on the website, and the statistics from the monitoring, which helps you recognize which indicators are important to member states and which ones they choose not to use. Thank you, Elizabeth.